In our country, the issue of immigration is unique in that it is a history of how the country came to be in its present form, whether it's the arrival of the first Europeans, whether it's the involuntary transfer of African slaves, whether it's the great exodus from Asia and Europe. So it's our history. It is also destiny. The story of the future of our country is the story of connecting with and easing the transition of the children of new Americans that will be the fundamental players in the remaking of our economy, of our society, the promise in our country.
I think people don't know enough about immigrant children. What they do know has been defined sort of in broad strokes. Kids coming across the border. We've heard about children in cages. To most people, that's immigrant children. The reality is that all around us, in our schools, everywhere, there are children of immigrants and immigrant children. These are kids that are going to grow up. They're going to be participants in our democracy. They're going to be participants in our economy. And what that means is that as we grow as a country, we're very dependent upon these kids.
Approximately a little over 1 million young people are undocumented. However, many more kids, about 4.5 million, are what we call mixed status kids. So they're kids who are born in the U.S., are American citizens, because all children born in the U.S. are citizens, but they have members of their family who are undocumented.
The U.S. citizen children in those mixed status families that have unauthorized immigrant parents have the same rights as any U.S. citizen child. Full access to health care, public schooling, and everything else.
But because their parents are not citizens, parents are often not taking advantage of the benefits because they know that there are down the line implications for potentially being deported by exposing themselves, as well as if they are standing in line to try to become citizens, it's often held against them.
The vast majority of children who in many ways live in the shadow of the law and in the shadow of the institutions of society do so because they, through no fault of their own, are growing up in a context where the lack of papers their parents have has an enormous echo in their lives, in their opportunities, in the way these children and youth are endeavoring to become members of the American family.
Children are growing up and their upbringing is based in a lot of lack of trust, insecurity, feeling like they're not part of a system, right? So while you go to school and your friend has a mom or a dad that comes to school, participates volunteering, goes to parent-teacher conferences, your parent might be afraid of doing that. So you go to school and you do your best, but then your parent might be afraid to actually show up. And there's a lot of research that shows that the parent support has a huge impact on the academic success on a child. And added to this, let's talk about the support system. While most children go to school and come back to a mom that will read to them at night or to a dad that's going to help with homework, most of these children are the first individual in their family whose English is a first language. And also most of these parents might not even have a middle school education, so their support system is pretty restricted. In many or most of the cases, these kids actually have to grow up pretty quickly and become the adult in the family. So families can't wait for them to be at an age appropriate to drive the mom or drive the dad. They are the ones that if they get stopped, they're going to be the ones talking to the police. Or if they need something from school, they're the ones that are going to speak up. So again, many of these children have to grow up pretty quickly, again, in a dynamic based on the lack of trust and fear.
What that means for that child, though, is that you're still living, in a sense, in the shadows. You could be an American citizen, but you're still worried and sort of beware of the government and anyone asking you questions about your parents. The parents are worried constantly about being deported. That means the children are worried constantly about the fact that they may get home from school and their parents may not be there, or at some point in their childhood, their parent may be taken away. You know, we've heard the story of the child who came to school with a suitcase And they're like, why did you bring a suitcase to school? And the child responds, well, my parents make me pack the suitcase just in case they're not home when I get back from school. The most important thing to a child, right, is your parent. And to live with this idea that your parent could be snatched away from you, it is horrible. And for these kids, these American citizen kids, they have this trauma in their life that they bring to school with them, that they grow up with.
So that is, from the developmental point of view, it's a catastrophe. It sets a dynamic of constant fear. We know that stress is really bad for children, and the notion that your parent or your loved one could be taken away at any moment is just plain traumatic. And we know that trauma is not conducive for optimal well-being, should we say, or flourishing of children.
As someone who's been working at the intersection of immigration and child well-being issues for a very long time, I can tell you that immigration enforcement is nothing new. We have seen immigration enforcement under previous administrations. We've seen children separated from their parents as a result of detention or deportation in previous years. But previously, family separation has been seen as this unfortunate unintended consequence, and harm to children has been seen as an unintended consequence. And often when there's been public outcry, there have been also policies put in place to help mitigate the harm to children caused by things like immigration enforcement. Unfortunately, in recent years and under this administration, we've seen that harm to children, whether it's ripping a baby away from a mother at the border or instituting the largest worksite raid in our nation's history on the first day of school in Mississippi, or denying children access to basic health care and nutrition assistance. All of these policy decisions are often done with the intention to harm children, and they're often seen as a strategy for deterring future migration. So the level of fear that I have seen around the country among children at all ages, and the amount of strain that this has put on early childhood providers and schools is like nothing I have ever seen.
Major studies are describing the nexus between these concerns over immigration, family separations, and the invasion of incivility. Too many cases of hatred into classrooms, bullying, aggression against children who are perceived as children of outsiders, the children of immigrants, the children of the other. The lack of papers, the lack of stability, the lack of certainty for the future becomes defining in the lives of the kids.
I think it's important to remember that the American public recognizes that all children in the U.S. deserve the opportunity to achieve their full potential, and that it's in our best interest as a country to ensure that all children have access to health care, that all children have access to an education, and that they're able to become healthy and productive adults. And the fact is that children in immigrant families, the vast majority of whom are U.S.-born citizens, are going to make up a significant portion of our future workforce. It's a very difficult decision to choose to leave one's country. We all know how hard it is to just move from one neighborhood to another, from one state to another, especially when you have children. Some are actually escaping real dangers, whether it's violence or persecution or debilitating poverty or natural disasters. Some people are coming here in the search of a better life for themselves or for their children, or to reunify with family members. The fact is that people migrate. It's part of our human history. It's a big part of our U.S. history, and one that has made us a better and stronger country. And parents are just doing the best they can to provide their child with a better life. And the vast majority of Americans believe that it's important to keep families together. Even some of the people who have some of the most conservative views on immigration don't believe that it's a good use of resources to detain or deport a hardworking father and take him away from his family when he poses no risk to our safety and whose only issue is that he doesn't have the proper documentation to work here.
We are making a child-focused issue a political issue. And this conversation has to be based on our children, their well-being, and the present and the future of our community. This is who we are. We are a mix of cultures, of diversity that makes us richer, that makes us better. Look at our workforce. Look at our gardeners, our teachers, our janitors, our physicians, lawyers. We have immigrants all over the place that, again, enrich our workforce and our culture on a daily basis.
I think in the end, it's all about how do we take care of all of our kids. For these children who really represent so much for us, I think we have to step back and say, are we doing everything possible to make sure that our future is secure and that these kids are doing okay? The answer is no, that we're not doing the best for them in school, we're not doing the best for them health-wise, and certainly mental health. This is something that would hold back any child and is certainly holding back these kids.
If we bring up all of our children together, sharing our common values, prosperity, hard work, democracy, if children in immigrant families integrate fully, and there's no reason why they can't, then these other differences won't matter. I think there's been way too much emphasis on the cultural and ethnic differences of immigrants, given that almost all of us are children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren of immigrants anyway. And what we need to explore is commonality.
So from the human point of view, it is absolutely dire that we not suck the oxygen out of the possibility of their flourishing. And from the economic point of view, it's a catastrophe if 26% of our kids are not flourishing. So from the purely human, individual human point of view, from the humanitarian point of view, from the economic point of view, we must figure out a way to solve this situation.
I think our country is at a critical crossroads right now. We know that the harm that's been done is going to take a long time to heal. We need these children to heal. We need them to do well. They deserve to do well. And we as a country can make that possible by stopping what's happening now and also implementing policies that can help put these kids back on a path to success. Without their success, we're going to be in serious trouble because not only are the costs of dealing with the poor health outcomes, the poor mental health outcomes, the increased poverty that these children are likely to fall into with their families torn apart, that is going to be a much greater cost to us in the future than if we actually invest in these kids and just provide them the basic protections and the ability to do well and stay with their families. If we do that, we're actually looking at a much brighter future for our country.